Hello everybody and welcome! Today I'm doing a video where I am doing a retrospective of all of the deck lists from our Dog Dreamers run. Well, mostly all our deck lists. We'll get to that when we get to that. But this was something we've been wanting to do for a while. I think I actually have a slide for it. Yeah. So we've been wanting to do our Dog Dreamers for a very long time. We actually had talked about it. Our first joke was when ARKHAM Horror first came out. And we were like, we should do a run where we have the dogs and the players and we have to play both. And it's like Dream Eaters and it's really funny. And we did it. And honestly, it was one of the worst runs we've ever had in our life. I don't want to spoil too much about how the scenarios went, but we crashed, we burned, we made poor decisions, and unfortunately, it led to a loss in Dream Eaters, the easiest campaign, which is kind of nuts that it came to that. But I did want to do a final deck list roundup, just see how the decks went. There's one that I'll put a link in the video description to our first roundup where we had our initial decks, so you can kind of see how they evolved if you're curious. We had a few rules. We built the decks with one collection, and we ruled that the ARKHAM deck list must contain their class ARKHAM cards in that deck, and let's see how the decks turned out. So I played a Kate Windpup deck, and the idea for my deck for this one was I was using archaic glyphs, and I was going to just make my number really high and just get a bunch of clues in the process. And then I would be moving charges onto the archaic glyphs so I could keep using it again and again as some of my things that allowed me to, you know, be a little bit stinky because they looked funny. So as you can see, I had the dog monocle, which basically was kind of my inspiration for how this deck went. And then I had the magnifying glasses, which are like another version of dog monocle. Also because, as everyone knows, I love the hell out of magnifying glass. I just adore it. I just need it. I want more of it. But all of this was the idea was that I make my number big, in addition to also the Death 13, which usually always finds a way into my secret decks, just because, you know, book for one experience is a really, and 3 costs is a pretty good rate. But all these things working together came to a very good tandem of trying to pay off the archaic glyphs, which we had the one for every 2 points you succeed by discovering an additional clue at your location. So the theory was pretty sound, right? I put down the archaic glyphs, and then I just hoover up clues from locations that I'm standing on, and then I just laugh my way to the bank. Did this work out? Yes, I think for the most part this worked out. I do think that the Kate Windpup deck was the best deck of the bunch, at least for my decks it was. I think it functioned very well, I think it was very powerful, and I think it didn't really suffer the same hiccups that some of the other ones did. This deck was boosted by the Ravenquill Archaic Glyphs. I attach it on the Archaic Glyphs. Because it gave me +2 skill value, gave me another method in which I could smooth the charges over from my alchemical transmutation or my scrying, and then it also gave me another way for me to find my archaic glyphs, albeit was a little bit expensive. I feel like this card might have been better if it would cost like 1 more experience, but the card was also free when it came into play. I know that might be asking for a lot from these kind of cards, but I do think that Ravenquill, while really cool, doesn't really scale up in the same way some of these other customizable cards do. And while I enjoyed Ravenquill, I did end up being a little bit like disappointed by it in the long term, even though it was very beneficial for its energy sap mechanic, which I used obviously. Not even like I don't even remember playing Eldritch Sophist that much, because the reality is, when you just generally also have 7 book while investigating, sometimes 8, you don't really need to use archaic glyphs more than 6 times in a scenario. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's like a little bit excessive and over the top, so it kind of like faltered because of that. A package that I included in this deck that I really enjoyed was the Calling in Favors Art Student and Laboratory Assistant. Those are great allies, and I love them in favor with Calling in Favors and the archaeology funding to just get me like value just passively throughout the game. Cryptic Research was my big XP purchase in this deck, and I don't regret it. I think that card is very good, and I think generally we should play it more. It's a little bit boring unless you just like pure value for your card draw, because just three cards is very nice. I also tried Unearth the Ancients too, because everyone well, not everyone, a few bad apples, a few of you bad apples out there would always tell me that I need to give Unearth the Ancients another shot. What you always forget about that is when I shit talk Unearth the Ancients, I'm mostly talking about the level 0 version. I think the level 2 version is fine. I've always said I think this card is good, but it's not great for how I like to play. If you don't know, I'm usually very asset light, and I like to just like have my asset in play immediately. I don't like waiting for the right assets to come in order for me to play it, but I figured with Cryptic Research and the Magnifying Glass, this would work really well, and I think Unearth the Ancients did perform fine in this deck. I think Unearth the Ancients does better if you're actually like using the relic part of it too, but I think it is pretty legit. Deduction, Longshot, and Perception also just did their job. Nothing really to complain about there. I also played a Kate Winthrop deck because those were the rules, and I made a big mistake with this deck. And I blame myself for the reason why we fell apart. And it comes down to a decision that I made during the initial deck building, where I wanted to play a Kate Winthrop deck inspired by a deck that I did for one of my deck tech series. But I was like, Travis, I don't feel confident in my ability to play the main Kluver. So I need you to be the main Kluver and I'll be the flex. And that decision was a very critical error. This deck actually functioned pretty well as the main Kluver. And while I should have just done the main Kluver, and I wanted to play Dr. Charles West just so I said I could play him and see if he was actually good, I should have left him out, had that be Dr. Milan, brought in, I mean, I could have kept the Existential Riddle and the Transmogrifies in here and just been the main Kluver. But unfortunately, I made a mistake and decided not to. So it led to a thing where Travis had to play a deck that was very outside of his comfort zone in the form of Kluver Skids. And Travis doesn't really like... So the thing about Kluving as a rogue is you kind of just need to really go into the Foot Matters archetype. And Travis, unfortunately, didn't for his build. He went for big money, which I think is still pretty fair, but it's not at a good enough rate that we could have got to where we needed to go. I don't blame Travis for that. I blame myself. Again, I'm going to point at my first error of being like, hey, Travis, I need you to get clues because I don't feel confident. But if you look at this deck actually, like, if you just take out Dr. Charles West, maybe take out the Barricade, this would actually be a very functional Kluver deck, right? So my plan for this deck was to use Survival Technique to put down things like Barricade, map the area, and Shortcut to support the team while also grabbing a few clues and locking down some enemies that show up when they do show up. I will say Survival Technique and Shortcut level 2 actually goes pretty hard. I think there's something there that you can play with. I don't know if Kate is the way to do that. I think Parallel Ashcan Pete might be the best way to do that. It helps that he's S tier, wink wink, but it's one of those things that I think it's actually a super viable strategy that you can do to achieve victory in this game. It's just like the value out of like using a fast to just have like, hey, you move, I'll pick it up, hey, I move, right? And then later picking it up if you can, or just leaving it there for like 2 resources, move 2 people, right? It actually like functioned really well for that. Overall, though, I didn't lean enough into chemistry set to really make the deck pop, and I think this was kind of like just a messy experience that, again, I think really comes down to my decision to not be the main Kluver, so I'm going to take the L on that one. Going on to Travis's Schizo Drool deck. So, Schizo Drool is all about moving, but the problem is Schizo Drool kind of sucks. And like, this is kind of like where the issues start to pop off. Schizo Drool is not really a great investigator. His ability is not like, it's cool, but like, unless you're doing Take the Wheel, it's not really something that really like sings, you know? Travis's deck did try to take advantage of this by moving a bunch and like trying to get like extra actions to just kind of like, the theory was that you could like out-tempo the game, even though you're not super efficient. You can just beat the game by just being better than it. So the higher dogs and the hair of the dog are kind of like ways to get good tests, but also like just like, again, out-tempo the game. Lucky Cigarette Guys to get cards. The Red Clock 5 to just get extreme value out of the game slowly over time, especially if you get it on turn 1 or 2. Fox Mask to help with both the foot and the book tests. Lone Wolf, because Travis's plan was to just be on his own, or a lone dog, if you will. A lone hound, maybe? I don't know. Skeleton Key, again, when your number's not great and you're trying to outvalue the game, use Skeleton Key to get actions to outvalue the game at a quicker pace, hopefully, in theory, right? Streetwise is another way to spend the money that he has to do good things, but as you can see from his events, it's kind of just like more on top of all that, right? He was the flex for this one, and he did flex very well, but I think the issue was that he was Schizo Drool, right? Like, that's kind of like where things really fell apart from the start. And like, that's kind of the nature. Like he said afterwards, he thinks he would have had more fun and we would have had more success if he played a, whatever Jacqueline Fine's dog is named, right? And he said like, it might've been hard to split up the Mystic class, but I don't know. There's a lot of good Mystic cards. I think he could have split up between the two decks, but, Travis and I kind of point to that as our downfall. My Kate decision and his Skid's decision. His own instinct was really fun to see play off. You can see all the upgrades that he has checked on here. But then also his general stuff after that was kind of just there. Now, the Skids O'Toole deck. Unfortunately, it did not save correctly. I went to go make these deck lists. And this one actually did not save. I just opened up the Arkham DB page that I made for it, and it was just like, you need 30 more cards before your deck becomes legal. And it's gone, and I think Travis would say that it's better that it is gone. So we can just say that this one is lost to the ether. Unfortunately, we don't have it, but again, like I said, Travis would just say it's best this way. Going on to Bryn with Bark Harrigan. This was a really cool deck, but I'm going to let you in on a little trade secret of PBG right now. Bryn told me, Travis wasn't there when he told me this, but he said that like right now, he's enjoying trying out weapons that aren't good to provide a little bit more excitement for himself and also for the table. So rather than just like have it always be like me using a very strong weapon, instead he is like, what if I tried playing with a Gravedigger's shovel as one of my ways to fight things? So this is a Bark Harrigan has 4 paws, or also known as, or to me, my X-Men. This was Bryn's name for the gang up card because Bryn decided to build a synergy deck, which actually I think was really, really cool and really, really fun to see in action. As you can see, he has every color. And he hit 4 or 5 synergy relatively quickly. The Call for Backup, I actually think is a really nice card in the synergy thing. I hope we see more synergy cards. I actually really like the synergy mechanic, and I hope we can actually see some stuff there. This deck on itself was actually pretty relatively simple. I don't have too much to say about it. Fighting with the Gravedigger Shovel was always a little bit touch and go, and this is like where our struggles kind of lied, because then Travis had to try to out-action the game. When he had his Mauser, it was really good. The Boxing Gloves gave him value to find his stuff. The Enchanted Blade was really good. But as you can see in this deck, there's actually no like good way to consistently kill things, but there's a lot of big explosion damage in the form of gang up and 1-2 punch. So that was like the theory that Bryn had here, and it was successful for the most part, except in the final scenario when Bryn said, I'm gonna do something stupid, and he took an attack of opportunity to take 2 horror, and then he died in the Mythos phase. And then unfortunately Travis and I were not able to get ahead enough of the game to win. So that is where we look at the issue on the dreaming side. So really, we all did something a little bit to blame for our horrible run of this one. Bryn, when he took the decision that he said he knew was stupid, but he wanted to try it out anyway, in the form of taking that attack of opportunity. Me, for saying I did not want to play the Clover. I didn't feel confident in my ability. And Travis, for not playing Jacqueline Fine, because he said that it probably would have been the best choice. So even when we go down together, we do it as a team, all three of us. Notably, he did also say to me my X-Men a lot. There's no lie there, which was always great. And I hope Bryn plays another to me my X-Men deck, because it is funny when he says that. On to the Mark Harrigan deck. This was an old shotgun deck that Bryn built. I think this was actually his first old shotgun deck. And I'm relatively surprised he did not do this with Will Yorick first, because I feel like Will Yorick is like the better user of old shotgun. But you know, with Bryn, as I told you, he likes to keep things interesting. And sometimes he just even throws a loop for me, just like, oh yeah, he's going to play old shotgun. With Mark Harrigan, cool. I think this deck actually did function pretty well. But the downside was, again, we point to my Kate deck, where I was supposed to be flexing a little bit, but I was not actually able to flex. Because Travis also wasn't able to get clues that well, so I kind of had to like up my clue game there. And again, if this was just all from the beginning, it would have been fine. So old shotguns, we have false surrender, hold up to get them into play, and then also like the one in the chamber to give it a little bit more. Cleaning kit to get some extra shots out of it. Spiritual resolve because they work really well with Mark Harrigan. I do think that Bryn was like, if he had like more ways to take advantage of the event thing, I think it would be really good, or to reload, but you only get like 3 level up experiences in Dream Eaters, so you're kind of limited on the options. You can see some burst clue damage as well in the form of Dynamite Blast. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty simple old shotgun deck. But without the old shotgun, the weapons become a little bit minor. Like I think Bryn even said a second Brand of Cthugga probably would have been a good idea. But alas, it was not in the cards, and we walked away as losers in our Dream Eaters. But those were our deck lists for our Dog Dreamers run. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next week on the channel, our draft of Innsmouth is coming, which I'm very excited for. We've recorded a few episodes and it's been a good time. But the deck list for that, the building for that is going to be out on Tuesday, and then on Friday, the gameplay begins for that. Huge thank you to everyone who watched this video, as well as our patrons, as well as everyone who is secretly watching live on Twitch right now. That's right, I bet you didn't know this video was live for Twitch, but it is. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, a GG.